You have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir, there's obviously quite a lot been said, in particular regarding this motion and indeed the amendment to the motion. I rise in support of the substantive motion and oppose the amended motion. Mr. Speaker, sir, I'd like to start off by saying that I'm also from Nandrunga, but also, Mr. Speaker, sir, I am actually, well, maybe now I can say I was, a friend of Honorable Tikundu Ndua. In fact, after the events of 2007, the Honorable Prime Minister had assigned Honorable Pio Tikundu Ndua to the Ministry of Justice, where I was the Minister for Justice, and he became the Permanent Secretary. And we forged a very, from my assessment, a very deep relationship, and I had a very close relationship with him. In fact, he was there when I was courting my wife, and when we got married, he was there. In fact, he was the only Permanent Secretary, apart from the Solicitor General, the Honorable Prime Minister, who attended the private function at my brother's house when we had the religious ceremony. He was the only person there, and he was very, very dear to me. Of course, Mr. Speaker, sir, that relationship grew even further when he became the Permanent Secretary in the Prime Minister's office, and then, of course, he became a senior member of the Cabinet of the Fiji First Government post-2014. I must admit, Mr. Speaker, sir, and I'm speaking from the heart, I was quite upset when he actually left the party. He resigned. He said it was health reasons, and obviously subsequently there are other reasons that came up, and I was always at a loss about that. Now, Mr. Speaker, sir, I was upset about it, and I was hurt about it, and I still, in a way, am ambiguous, because I still want to reach out to him, but I see him probably seeing me as a political adversary. My short relationship with him, if it can cause me so much anguish, in particular when I considered him to be close to me and very dear to me, and I shared many secrets with him, as he knows, both about my personal life, my married life, etc. And he saw my son grow up, Ibrahim. So, Mr. Speaker, sir, I was actually thinking, here am I've only come onto the scene very recently. What would be the deep sense of relationship between the Honorable Tikundu Ndua and the Honorable Prime Minister? That, Mr. Speaker, sir, says a lot. And I can say also my experience with the military camaraderie was very new in 2007. And I saw the deep sense of loyalty, allegiance, and camaraderie that the military actually did foster. And I, in fact, put myself in the shoes of the Honorable Prime Minister at the hurt, at the anguish he would have felt if the Honorable Tikundu Ndua had said, which he had said, that you should look into your own house. Mr. Speaker, sir, I think it is quite disingenuous for those who subsequently said that when he said in your own house, he meant your party. Nobody ever says your party is the house, or the house is your party. Nobody ever says the house is this side of the house. The house is the entire chamber, Mr. Speaker, sir. Unfortunately, and I hope it goes on record, that the Hansard actually should change the house to small h. It's not the house. It said in your house. The house is a capital H. Mr. Speaker, sir, the events that are, a lot of things have been said. And I wanted to, there's few words that actually came to my mind, and they are due process, rule of law, justice, and I believe in substantive justice, precedent setting, as has been talked about, the actual offences themselves in the law itself, whether it's in the Crimes Act or whether in any other type of law, democracy, parliamentary democracy, looking at other jurisdictions, whether there's contradictions, any oxymorons that have been discussed, vindictiveness, whether we are in fact being led by some form of vindictiveness because it happened to XYZ person, therefore it should happen to this person. And whether we're looking at trial by media, somebody talked about, well, the public has already decided that he is guilty. Isn't this contradictory to the rule of law? Isn't this trial by media the very essence of breaking down what we call the rule of law? And Mr. Speaker, sir, of course, we talked about high standards of behavior that is expected of us. Mr. Speaker, sir, just very quickly, and I know we've all discussed this quite a lot. Mr. Speaker, sir, the reality of the matter is the Honourable Leader of Opposition talked about parliamentary democracy, the sanctity of Parliament. And I want to remind him that this is the very chamber in which he violated the sanctity of Parliament, of elected representation. And Mr. Speaker, sir, so therefore I find that contradiction something that needs to be, of course, addressed. Mr. Speaker, sir, there are many people on that side of the House who talked about the events of 2000 as we support the cause but not the method. Yet the cause, the method, was actually breaching the rule of law, was actually evading, raping parliamentary democracy. Mr. Speaker, sir. So let's look at it, from a realistic perspective. Honorable Bulitavu's matter was used. Absolutely. It is not a privileged matter. This is why the motion was brought, because it was a matter of national importance. And this is why, in the same way as honorable members from the other side have a right to bring motions on various topics, which they believe is important to them, they do bring those topics, and we do debate those topics. So, this side of the House felt there was an important topic that needed to be discussed. Domestic violence, that had been also given a racial tint. That's why it was discussed. There's nothing untoward about that. Mr. Speaker, sir, again, of course, his comments were outside the precincts of Parliament. It does not mean the motion cannot be brought about. Mr. Speaker, sir, I found that number of the comments by honourable members from the other side quite contradictory, because on one hand, they talked about the independence of process, they talked about the independence of the police, yet in the same breath, or a few sentences later, they condemned the police. They've already made an assumption that the police will do X, Y, Z. Where is the independence of the police? They said the police will already do this. They're already condemning the police. They're already prejudging the matter. They're saying it's assault. Where is the assault in the Criminal Procedure Act, Mr. Speaker, sir? It has not been established. We have seen numerous instances of videos released on social media that has been doctored. I think somebody from there in that corner mentioned, that I prohibited that from coming in, because the Privileges Committee must look at evidence that is reliable, that is credible. So that's the reason, Mr. Speaker, so they talk about due process, about natural justice. These are the essential ingredients of due process, of natural justice, Mr. Speaker, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir, again, Honourable Leader of Opposition started quoting from Eskin May about somebody who had been criminally convicted. Nobody has been criminally convicted in this particular case, so it's completely irrelevant. Mr. Speaker, sir, we have, of course, heard the issue about Honourable Lalam Balavu, about his particular matter. I mean, there's one particular word the Honourable Kepa said that he had said. In fact, he had said other words too, and I don't want to go into those words. But, Mr. Speaker, sir, the reality of as any good lawyer would tell you, you do not apply the law equally to all evidence, all matters. It depends. This is why even in the law there's a demarcation, there's a finesse, there's a nuanced approach to law in the area of assault. You have common assault. You have assault GBH, what they call occasioning grievous bodily harm. You have murder, you have manslaughter. You have different grades, different instances. Each matter turns on its own facts, on its own evidence, on the own law, on the precedent that's been set. To come here and say, let's wipe the table clean with a one cloth is completely incorrect. Honourable Lalam Balavu's matter was about the fact that the very institution of the legislature was being attacked, which is embodied in the Speaker. Mr. Speaker, sir, we came out in 2014 from an event in 2000 when in Vaito, people had again violated not just from a structural perspective, but physically. People were found copulating on the chair of the Speaker. It's a fact. It's a documented fact. People were copulating on the chair of the Speaker. This chair, Mr. Speaker, sir, that you are sitting on was found somewhere else. Somewhere in the rubbish. It was brought and cleaned and put here. This was a gift from the Indian government. Mr. Speaker, sir. That's what happened. This is why it was so important to send a message in respect of anybody that violated the very institution of the legislature. Again, the Honourable Tiko Da's matter and Tipo Dronindalo's matter. It was again to do with racial matters, Mr. Speaker, sir. And we have had a history in this country of racial antagonism. Honorable Leader of Opposition justified his coups on that basis. We know that. Events of 2000 were justified on that basis. It has been the bane of our society. That is why it is very important to deliver a clear message regarding those issues, that we as members of Parliament need to set a particular standard in those critical issues that affect the nation state of Fiji. That's what's been used, Mr. Speaker, sir. So, Mr. Speaker, sir, again, Honourable Leader of Opposition talked about commission inquiry, etc. I mean, completely irrelevant. Mr. Speaker, sir, the other issue that I wanted to highlight is again the contradiction. Honourable Garangere Tambua said it was not a privileges matter, and I again want to reiterate the letter that was sent by the Honourable Leader of NFP, Honourable Biman Prasad, on the 9th of August. And it reads, Mr. Speaker, sir, it's addressed to you, Mr. Speaker, sir. We refer to our earlier letter of this afternoon under the above heading. Heading is urgent request to secure CCTV footage of Parliament for Friday, 9th August 2019. We need to clarify to you that this is a matter which we intend to bring to the Privileges Committee of Parliament. It will therefore become a parliamentary matter. Mr. Speaker, sir, I again, please, I hope members stop being disingenuous. We need to come to these debates with clear hands, Mr. Speaker, sir. So the reality of the matter is, Mr. Speaker, sir, that the intention was there. The reality of the matter is, Mr. Speaker, sir, that again, as highlighted by the members on this side of the House, the Honourable Prime Minister, as you are aware, Mr. Speaker, sir, a few hours later, I think approximately 3.5 to 4 hours later, was in your chambers, apologized to you, apologized to Parliament, and wanted to apologize to Honourable Tikundu Ndua. We understand because of the non-availability of Honourable Tikundu Ndua, that meeting did not take place. It was to be on Saturday at 10 a.m. because the Honourable Prime Minister was leaving for Tuvalu for the Pacific Island Leaders meeting on Sunday. That meeting did not eventuate. He subsequently then again went to you, Honourable Mr. Speaker, sir, at the Intercontinental Hotel when they had a workshop on the SDGs. Again he made attempts. That did not eventuate. Again, through the Privileges Committee, Mr. Speaker, sir, Privileges Committee, Mr. Speaker, sir, the Privileges Committee put it to him, is he willing to apologize? He said, absolutely yes. So, Mr. Speaker, sir, the reality of the matter is somebody said, man up, etc. I'll tell you, it takes a bigger man to apologize, recognize your mistake, and apologize, and say, I did wrong, and let's move along. Mr. Speaker, sir. 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 Mr. Speaker, sir.
Order.
Mr. Speaker, sir, we all know who needs help. We all know who needs help, Mr. Speaker, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir, the Honourable Prasad talked about the sanctity of Parliament and how Parliament is there. NFP, sorry, I said FNPF. NFP has been there for 56 years, etc. I recall, Mr. Speaker, sir, when the 1919 racist constitution was put in place, the skewed constitution, they had election in 1992. The NFP was the first party that said, despite the flaws of the 1990 constitution, we will not boycott the elections, we'll participate because we can actually change from within. Honourable Leader of Opposition is aware of that, and that led to the relationship between him and the Leader of Opposition, then Jairam Reddy. The Labour Party decided to boycott. It was only the 11th hour they decided to participate. Yet the Honourable Biman Prasad was absent from Parliament for the last 4 days. For the last 4 days he has not been here with his party, and I hope the party stalwarts are watching what he's doing, Mr. Speaker, sir. This is kind of hypocritical position, Mr. Speaker, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir, the other issue that I wanted to talk about is that, again, people have talked about assault. It has not been established, Mr. Speaker, sir. You can't say that. If you on one breath talk about the due process, if you talk about the rule of law, you don't make judgments even before the process is completed. There are two processes available, Mr. Speaker, sir. There are two processes available. The Parliament, as one of the arms of the state, has the ability to govern its own affairs. The matter happened in the precincts of Parliament, Mr. Speaker, sir. So Parliament is seized of the matter and is dealing with the matter. The Honourable Tikon Duandua decided to report the matter to the police. That's a separate process, and that process will be completed. Unfortunately, the honourable members here today decided to comment on that. They've already commented on the credibility of the police force. Tried to tame the Honourable Minister for Defence. When anybody, Honourable Gadigal Tambu has got some imbecilic reading of the Constitution. Order. The Constitution is quite clear. The Honourable Leader, the Honourable Minister for Defence does not run the police force. He is the Minister responsible, does not run the police force. The police force is independent. He's got his own processes. They should know that, Mr. Speaker, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir, again, anybody watching the video would know the Honourable Prime Minister is actually on his way to the car. Any person would know that. If you watch the video, he's on his way to the car, he's obviously something gained his attention, then his attention was diverted. It's not premeditated as made. It was spontaneous reaction. Spontaneous reaction, Mr. Speaker, sir. This is why, Mr. Speaker, sir, within a few hours he actually went and immediately apologized, Mr. Speaker, sir, to you, Mr. Speaker, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir, Mr. Speaker, sir, I want to again, highlight this issue about what they brought in about Honourable Lalam Balavu and the other members who were suspended. Mr. Speaker, sir, like I've said, each matter turns on its own facts and are related to that. You cannot use that. Honourable Niko Nawaikula, Honourable Tambuya, Honourable Gyoni Baravi know that they are lawyers. That each, Honourable Bulitavu, sorry, I forgot about you, that these matters turn on their own facts. Honourable Salote Rondrondo said, if it had happened in Australia or New Zealand, people would have resigned. Let me quote what happened in Canada, which is a far more mature jurisdiction than Australia and New Zealand. Mr. Speaker, sir, the current Prime Minister of Canada, Trudeau, Mr. Speaker, sir, was on the floor of Parliament, Mr. Speaker, sir. When there were people gathered on the floor of Parliament, while Parliament was in session, he rushed to a group of people who actually were delaying the vote on a particular bill. He rushed through them. There's video footage on that. There's also the report of the Privileges Committee that dealt with it too. Please have a look at it. He rushed towards them. He manhandled, as they say, grabbed one of the members, the whips, I understand, to bring him to vote. In the process, he elbowed the breast of one of the MPs, and, as quoted, since Honourable Gadigal Tambu has decided to use expletives in this Parliament, he said, "Get the fuck out of my way." And, Mr. Speaker, sir, the matter was dealt with in that particular jurisdiction because they wanted examples of that. He used that. He actually apologized, Mr. Speaker, sir. The matter was referred to the Privileges Committee also, Mr. Speaker, sir. So this is some of the examples. These are some of the examples on a Commonwealth jurisdiction from Canada. Far more mature democracy than countries like even Australia and New Zealand. They should have actually done their research, Mr. Speaker, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir, the reality of the matter is, Mr. Speaker, sir, the Honourable Leader of Opposition, I was there, I saw Honourable Leader of Opposition with his entourage that went to meet the Honourable Prime Minister on that particular day. The Honourable Prime Minister had already, I've got 5 minutes, Honourable Prime Minister had already made overtures, not just overtures, but made 4 attempts to do the apology. The Honourable Leader of Opposition came with the entourage and they asked him whether he wanted to apologize or not, will be reconciled. He said, of course. He said, of course. Unfortunately, that was a good spirit, but he had already started the train. Unfortunately, that did not eventuate. And Honourable Lalam Balavu, with all due respect to him, I found what he said. The first half of what you said I liked. The second half I found that you contradicted yourself. Because you talked about reconciliation, the need to do it, and this is our way to do it, but then in the next breath you said, get rid of him for the next 2 years. I don't know whether he said it because, because you were suspended for 2 years. So, Mr. Speaker, sir, the reality of the matter, Mr. Speaker, sir, the Honourable Prime Minister, unlike Donald Trump, has not ever claimed to be the Messiah. Please remember that. He has never claimed to be the Messiah. Many people call you different names, does not mean that you are that person. If other third parties are doing it, that's their choice, Mr. Speaker, sir. So, Mr. Speaker, sir, I would like to commend the Privileges Committee. And let me last comment, Mr. Speaker, sir. Once you are appointed to a committee, you have a fiduciary duty to that particular committee. You cannot be implicated or influenced by those outside, whether it's from your party, not your party. That's the fiduciary duty you have, Mr. Speaker, sir. And by all indication, it would appear that some of the members of the Privileges Committee did not fulfill that fiduciary duty by being influenced. Mr. Speaker, sir, the Honourable Leader of Opposition wrote a letter, said that I was conflicted. NFP wrote a letter that I was conflicted, Mr. Speaker, sir. I immediately stepped down, but Honourable Leader of Opposition continued to sit even though he made statements on it. So, Mr. Speaker, sir, just my last sentence. So, I mean, these are the kind of contradictions that have taken place, and I therefore, that's normally a good sign in any, it's a good sign. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir. I support the motion. Thank you.
Honourable.